Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Christine Romalotti had always expected Phyllis Summers to pull some kind of stunt on her wedding day, maybe a dramatic toast, maybe an emotional outburst, maybe even a verbal takedown dripping with venom, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for the nightmare that unfolded the moment she stepped away from the bridal suite for just 1 minute to get a breath of air before walking down the aisle, because that one moment, that tiny slice of vulnerability, was all Phyllis needed to execute a plan that no one believed she was truly capable of, a plan that twisted the joyous day into a living horror, a plan that ended with Christine missing and the entire wedding collapsing into chaos. It started innocently enough. Christine, dressed in the elegant ivory gown that Lauren helped her choose, stepped out onto the terrace behind the venue, inhaling deeply to center herself before the ceremony began. The soft breeze carried the scent of roses, the music inside hummed with pre-wedding excitement, and she closed her eyes for just a second. But when she opened them, she was no longer alone. Phyllis Summers stepped out from behind a column, her presence slicing through the tranquility like a blade, red hair wild from rushing, eyes sharp and glittering with something unhinged yet disturbingly focused. "Phyllis?" Christine said, instantly tense, her instincts screaming. "What are you doing back here?" But Phyllis didn't answer. She only smiled, slow, unsettling, the kind of smile that stripped all warmth from the air. "You didn't really think I'd let you marry Danny, again, without having a little chat, did you?" Christine stiffened. "Whatever you have to say can wait. The wedding is starting." Phyllis's smile widened. "Oh, honey, yours isn't." And before Christine could process the threat in those words, Phyllis moved. Fast. Too fast. A cloth pressed against Christine's mouth. Her vision blurred. The world spun. Christine tried to fight, clawing at Phyllis's wrist, but her limbs turned to water. Darkness swallowed everything. When she awoke, the cell phone buzzing faintly in her pocket was the only light piercing the pitch-black room. Christine's heart pounded as she struggled against the ropes binding her wrists. Her veil was gone. Her dress was wrinkled. She could hear water dripping somewhere, echoing eerily through what she quickly realized was a storage basement, cold, concrete, isolated. And then she heard footsteps. "Phyllis. Rise and shine, Princess Cricket," Phyllis chirped, flicking on a dim bulb overhead. Christine squinted, stunned by the sight of Phyllis pacing like she was preparing for a board meeting, not a felony. "You're insane," Christine spat, straining against the ropes. "You kidnapped me, on my wedding day? Have you completely lost your mind?" Phyllis waved her hand like Christine was being overdramatic. "Oh, relax. You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." "But you weren't listening. You never listen. Danny doesn't belong with you. He belongs with someone who actually understands him. Someone who has history with him that matters. Someone like you." Christine snapped. Phyllis's jaw clenched. "Someone who knows how to love him without suffocating him." Christine laughed, harsh, disbelieving. "You think kidnapping me proves you're better for Danny?" Phyllis's eyes flashed with anger, but behind that rage was something more broken, something desperate. "I didn't want to do this," she said through gritted teeth. "But you were going to take him away again. And I couldn't let that happen. Not this time." Meanwhile, at the venue, Danny was pacing the length of the aisle in full-blown panic, the guests murmuring nervously as the wedding planner whispered apologies and excuses. Christine's absence was unexplained, then concerning, then terrifying. Lauren, Nina, Paul, and Tracy all split up to search the hallways, calling Christine's name, checking bathrooms, empty rooms, even the parking lot. Nothing. Not one trace. Daniel kept refreshing his phone, praying for a text. Mariah and Tessa tried to calm the increasingly frantic guests. The officiant asked if they should delay the ceremony. And Danny, who had already lived through too many disasters involving Phyllis, felt dread coil in his stomach, a dread so specific, so familiar, that he didn't hesitate when he grabbed his phone and called her. Phyllis. Answer the phone, he muttered, pacing. Straight to voicemail. Again. Again. And the more she didn't answer, the more the truth clawed at him. Where is she? Danny whispered. What did you do? Back in the basement, Phyllis was unraveling with every passing second. Her plan had not gone as smoothly as she imagined. She kept glancing at her phone, which buzzed nonstop. They're going to figure this out, Christine said, her voice steady despite the fear she was barely containing. Danny's already suspicious. And when they find us, because trust me, they will, you're going to prison. For a very long time. Phyllis slammed her hand against the wall, frustration exploding. Stop talking like I'm some kind of monster. I'm trying to fix things. By kidnapping a bride? Christine snapped. You didn't fix anything. You destroyed everything. Tears pooled in Phyllis's eyes, angry tears she tried to blink away. He loved me, Christine. Once upon a time, he loved me. And somewhere in there, he still does. Christine's face softened, not with sympathy, but with truth. Even if he does. Danny isn't yours to keep. And this? This stunt? This guarantees he'll never look at you the same way again. That hit. Hard. Phyllis's entire body trembled as she sank onto a wooden crate. I wasn't supposed to hurt you, she whispered. I just needed time. Time to think. Time to figure out what to do. Then untie me, Christine said softly, shifting her tone. Phyllis, listen to me. Nothing good comes after this. But you can stop it from getting worse. Untie me. Let me go. Before someone finds us and ruins both our lives. Phyllis's breath hitched. She looked at Christine, the ropes, the dress, the fear, and for a second, guilt flickered in her expression. But then a horn honked outside. Voices. Footsteps. The unmistakable sound of people searching. No, Phyllis whispered, panic overtaking her. No, 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 this can't be happening. Not now. Christine straightened. Phyllis. It's over. Phyllis rushed to the door, slamming it shut and dragging a metal shelf in front of it. They can't find us like this. They will find us, Christine said firmly. And the longer you drag this out, the worse it gets. Upstairs, Danny was shouting Christine's name as he and Paul searched the old storage wing of the venue. Another bang. More footsteps. Phyllis was cornered, spiraling. She turned back to Christine with wild, desperate eyes. I didn't want it to go this far, she whispered. I just wanted him to see you aren't meant for him. He chose me, Christine replied gently. That doesn't erase your history with him, but you don't get to decide his future. Phyllis's hand shook violently. She pressed them to her temples, pacing like an animal trapped in its own panic. I messed up. Oh God, I messed up. Christine seized the moment. Phyllis, look at me. Phyllis froze. Untie me. Now. Before the police come. Before Danny comes. Help yourself by helping me. Phyllis stared for a long, agonizing moment, then the voices upstairs grew louder. Danny's voice. Lauren's. Paul's. Her eyes widened with terror. I can't, she whispered, right before she grabbed a utility knife from the wall. Christine's pulse spiked, bracing for the worst, but Phyllis didn't approach her with the blade. Instead, she sliced the ropes, freeing Christine's wrists. Christine gasped with relief, rubbing the raw, burning skin. Thank you, she whispered, stunned. Phyllis backed away, shaking, the knife clattering to the floor. Go. Just go. Christine stood, but before she could reach the door, it burst open, knocking the shelf aside, and Danny rushed in, followed by Paul and Lauren. Christine. Danny grabbed her, pulling her into a shaking embrace. Phyllis stumbled back, hands up, face paled by the gravity of what she'd done. "Danny, I didn't mean," but Danny looked at her like she was a stranger. A stranger who had crossed every line imaginable. "What did you do?" he whispered, voice trembling with rage. Christine held his arm tightly, shaken but steady. Paul immediately cuffed Phyllis as she sobbed, insisting she never intended harm. But intent didn't matter. Not now. Christine's wedding was ruined. The guests had fled. The day was shattered beyond repair. And as Phyllis was escorted up the stairs, mascara streaking, heartbroken, delusional, destroyed, she looked back at Christine with a tearful whisper, "I was just trying to stop you from making a mistake." Christine turned away, leaning into Danny as the weight of the day finally crashed down around them. The wedding was over. The bride had been kidnapped. Phyllis had crossed the final line. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Phyllis Summers had been pacing the hallway outside the reception ballroom like a restless flame waiting for oxygen, the muffled laughter and clinking glasses fueling that impulsive part of her that always demanded center stage, especially when Christine Romalotti was involved, and by the time Kane Ashby finally coaxed her back inside, the wedding reception was in full swing, lights dimmed to a romantic shimmer, music soft, and guests still glowing from the ceremony as they lifted champagne. Flutes to celebrate Christine and Danny entering this supposedly blissful new chapter. Everyone was relaxed, happy, unsuspecting, the perfect audience for whatever storm Phyllis was brewing. She walked in with Kane at her side, her heels hitting the floor with sharp purpose, her eyes scanning the room until she spotted the bride and groom surrounded by friends and family. Christine stiffened the second she saw her, Danny's expression tightening with that familiar mix of dread and resignation, but Phyllis ignored the tension rolling off the couple like heat waves. She spotted a tray of champagne on a nearby table, snatched a glass with theatrical grace, and lifted it high before anyone could stop her. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice loud enough to slice clean through the music, conversation, and the radiant bubble of newlywed joy. The room froze. Forks hovered, glasses paused midair, guests exchanged uneasy glances because everyone knew Phyllis's toasts had a reputation, not for warmth, but for wildfire. Kane, standing beside her like he'd been dragged into an active landmine field, tried to give her a subtle nudge, a silent "please don't do this," but Phyllis had already committed. She stepped forward, taking center stage as if the reception belonged to her, as if this entire night, Christine's night, was merely another backdrop for a Phyllis Summers event. Christine's jaw tightened, her hands clasping in front of her bouquet as if bracing herself, and Danny moved a half step like he was preparing to intervene, but Phyllis flashed both of them a disarming smile that fooled absolutely no one. "Relax," she purred, letting her voice drip with faux sweetness. "It's a wedding, not a battlefield, at least not yet." A few guests laughed nervously, the kind of brittle laughter that came from people unable to decide whether to bolt for the exit or stay to witness the explosion. Kane looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. But against all expectations, Phyllis didn't launch into accusations, insults, or any of her signature verbal grenades. Instead, she lifted her glass and began a speech so deceptively polite that it threw the entire room off balance. She spoke about history, complicated, dramatic, occasionally regrettable history, and how life had a funny way of throwing the same people together no matter how hard fate tried to keep them apart. She mentioned love's persistence, the resilience of relationships, the unpredictable twists that brought Christine and Danny back to each other. She even tossed in a line about maturity and growth that sounded like she was describing herself, except no one in the room believed she meant a word of it. Christine stared, stunned and suspicious, waiting for the dagger hidden behind the diplomacy. Danny watched warily, ready to step in if Phyllis crossed even a single line. But somehow she didn't. Somehow the blade she carried stayed sheathed. And the more she talked, the more mesmerizing and confusing the moment became. Phyllis's voice grew soft, almost genuine. "You two found your way back," she said, her eyes briefly landing on Danny with a flicker of something unspoken, something old and bruised. "Most people don't get that kind of second chance. So, congratulations." "Truly." The room exhaled. Christine blinked, caught between disbelief and relief. A few guests clapped hesitantly. Kane let out a breath he looked like he'd been holding since the toast began. And for a fleeting moment, it seemed like Phyllis Summers, Queen of Chaos, had managed to stand in the middle of her greatest enemy's wedding reception and show a hint, just a hint, of grace. But of course, even in her version of grace, she couldn't resist stirring the pot just a little. I mean, she added with a playful smirk, who would have thought you two would actually make it down the aisle? No allergic reactions this time, thank goodness. A ripple of whispers shot through the room, eyes darting toward Christine, who stiffened at the mention of the flower incident. Lauren Fenmore Baldwin, standing near the dessert table, turned pale as she realized exactly where Phyllis was going. Before Phyllis could elaborate, Lauren rushed forward, flustered. "Phyllis, wait, I owe you an apology," she blurted, drawing everyone's attention. "The flowers, the mums. I thought you sent them. I assumed the worst." Christine looked equally embarrassed and irritated, reliving the moment her eyes had swelled, her throat had tightened, her body had reacted violently during the rehearsal dinner. It had been humiliating, terrifying, and she'd been convinced Phyllis was behind it. But Lauren shook her head, shame in her voice. "It wasn't sabotage. It was Esther. She sent them by accident. I was wrong." Phyllis, hands on her hips now, gave Lauren a slow nod that dripped with "I told you so," though she didn't verbalize it, shocking everyone again. "Thank you for saying that," Phyllis replied with an unexpectedly measured tone. "It means more than you think." Lauren sighed with relief, and Christine shifted uncomfortably, forced to acknowledge that, at least this once, Phyllis hadn't been the villain. The crowd relaxed again, tension dissolving further. Kane, emboldened by Phyllis's restraint, leaned toward her. "See," he whispered. "You're doing great." Phyllis gave him a small, triumphant smile, pleased with herself, though the fire in her eyes made it clear she still enjoyed being at the center of attention. But before any calm could truly settle, the reception shifted into its next act. Daniel Romalotti Jr. stepped up to the small stage with his guitar, Tessa Porter joining him with her mic, the pair exchanging crackling glances that had not gone unnoticed throughout the evening. Their upcoming performance had been hyped all night, but now, as they tuned their instruments, the air around them felt loaded, charged with more than just creative chemistry. Phyllis, watching from her table with Kane, snorted softly. "Oh look," she muttered. "Another pair pretending nothing's going on." Kane raised his brows. "You think something's going on? Please." Phyllis waved her hand. "I can spot forbidden tension from across a room." And indeed, Daniel and Tessa looked like two magnets trying very hard not to snap together. Every time their eyes met, sparks practically flew off the stage. When they began to perform, harmonizing beautifully, swaying toward each other, feeding off shared energy, the room fell silent, mesmerized. But beneath the applause and admiration, temptation simmered. Christine and Danny exchanged a subtle look, clearly noticing the heat between Daniel and Tessa. Mariah stood stiffly in the back, her expression tightening each time Tessa's gaze lingered a little too long on Daniel. And Daniel, well, he looked lit from within, as if Tessa awakened something he'd tried hard to keep buried. By the time the song ended, the tension between them was unmistakable. The applause thundered, but Tessa and Daniel barely noticed the crowd, their eyes locked for just a second too long. Long enough for everyone, including Phyllis, to clock the danger. "Oh, they're definitely in trouble," Phyllis whispered smugly, leaning back in her chair. "Give it a week." Kane chuckled, shaking his head but clearly amused. "You're impossible." "And yet," she said, lifting her champagne glass again, accurate. Across the room, Christine attempted to reclaim control of her own reception, stepping up to thank everyone for coming, but the atmosphere had already shifted. Phyllis's toast, unexpectedly restrained but undeniably chaotic, had cracked open emotional fault lines everywhere, old rivalries, new sparks, buried jealousy, unraveling secrets. And though she hadn't blown up the wedding like everyone assumed she would, she had still managed to derail the night in a uniquely Phyllis way, by stirring every pot without flipping a single table. For once, people weren't angry with her, they were relieved. Grateful even. Christine, still wary, gave Phyllis a nod, tight, reluctant, but genuine. Danny followed suit, his look carrying a mixture of gratitude and lingering pain from the complicated history they shared. And as the reception carried on with forced cheerfulness, quiet gossip, and rising romantic tensions, one thing became unmistakably clear: Phyllis Summers didn't need to cause destruction to dominate a room. All she needed was a glass, a spotlight, and the perfect moment to strike. And whether she meant to or not, she had changed the trajectory of the entire evening. Again. Phyllis's toast derails Christine's wedding reception. Phyllis Summers' toast will derail the wedding reception, so Kane Ashby will get dragged into more drama. Following Christine Romalotti and Danny Romalotti's marriage ceremony, they'll have a fun reception with all their guests. There'll be plenty of toasts to the blissful couple as they look forward to this exciting new chapter. Phyllis has already been hovering around the festivities, but she'll insert herself in the middle of the action on Monday's episode. Once part 2 of the wedding event gets underway, Phyllis will enter with Kane and see the perfect opportunity to make a scene. Phyllis will grab a glass of bubbly and pipe up about wanting to make a toast. Kane will be standing next to Phyllis as she steals the spotlight, which could leave Christine and Danny fuming at first. However, Phyllis might prove she can be civil when she wants to be and extend some well wishes to the newlyweds in the end. Even if Phyllis causes a fuss and isn't all that sincere, it'll be a win if she doesn't totally ruin the vibe. Kane may be amused with Phyllis's behavior in the end and could perhaps praise her for showing some restraint instead of bashing the bride. It's no secret that Christine is Phyllis's worst enemy, but Phyllis may hold back during this toast on Monday's YNR episode and leave everyone fairly relieved.